measuring will come up again during the book.
Yeah, and
Is that
I
correct?
think I think the reason why we put it up so early is because I think if you're building whatever you call it, a platform, or if you have a platform engineering initiative, if you don't think upfront how you measure the impact and the success that you have, if you think about it afterwards, how can you now what you've built, how can you now justify that what you've built is actually solving a problem? Then I think it's too late. And with any product engineering, right? If we build a new product, before we put down money and engineering time, you need to first figure out who is the target audience, what problems do they have, how do we solve it, how can we measure that we actually make their life easier, and how much are they willing to pay for that. And that's exactly the same thing. So if you need to make early good decisions, not only on what problems you're solving for whom, but also in the end, what is the return on investment? And this is why I think this is, you will obviously see it later in the book as well, but too many organizations, I think, and this is not just for platform engineering, but for anything when you're building products, if you think about your KPIs after the fact, then I think you're not necessarily bound for success.
Yeah, I think that's
I
it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I really like that. More and more, this idea is being moved to, let's say, like there's a shift left for KPI approach in platform engineering. We keep seeing it more and more because everyone wants to understand, like measure the success or if it's actually got to the purpose. So I really like that it just showed up early in the stage. So these narratives will push platform teams to actually take this earlier in their plates, I would say.
Yeah.
And I hope.
Yeah,
And
there's. Oh, sorry, Max.
it's very relevant for the product part, right? Because like if you would resell something, whatever, a pencil or so, and you bring it into supermarkets, you want to know how much you have sold within which amount of time to understand if your product is good or bad. And if you look in the latest State of DevOps report, you see that a lot of platform engineering initiatives are failing, and they're failing because it's often very unclear for what and why they're doing it, and they also do not have something to compare. They would build an entire platform with an entire team, introduce it entirely to an organization, and then say like, is it now better than 2 years ago, or is it worse? And that's like difficult to compare. That's why we bring it so early up to say like, hey, you need to directly make your thoughts about it and maybe start already measure now, even if you do not have built anything with the platform.
Yeah, and the other thing that we had in there, we have it a couple places. We talk about this multiple times. User interviews. Interview your users to make sure you know what they are doing today and like what works and what doesn't work for them, right? Like you have to actually like talk to these people who are going to be using what you're building to make sure that you're building something that makes sense for them.
Yeah, and then maybe another thing is, because we hear these conversations so often with established organizations where they say, well, platform engineering is nothing for me because we're not building new microservices in the cloud. And my response is always, so do you have an efficient development organization right now? Because if not, then there is a chance that you can make it easier for your engineers, whether they're building the latest fancy tech stack or whether they are still, maintaining their mainframes. It doesn't, the cloud, as the whole idea of platform engineering and making organizations more efficient is not constrained to just the latest technology stack. And this is also in the book when we talked about the use cases. I think in chapter 2, actually, we bring up a couple of use cases that are completely independent of whether you're building a new app, whether it runs on Kubernetes or not. And
Interesting. Have you heard of the metric space? I know that you mentioned here DORA, but there's other people say like some of the DORA metrics are good, some of them are like not applicable, and then there's other type of metrics that are not DORA. Just a little bit to expand in the space.
Yeah, no, they are also coming up in the book. For us, like the DORA metrics is more like the inner view of software delivery, what's maybe relevant for software development, like the speed and whatever. While space is, well, it's more framework, it's more open. and you can adjust it either to individuals, to teams, or even to the system. There's somewhere a graphic in the book. I'm not sure if it's chapter 2 or if
Yeah,
you
he'll put
talked
it
earlier
on
about
chapter
it.
70. And people are joining new. This book is very recent, as of like last year October, right? So the new concepts or new things or new learnings from the industry are captured in this book. From what I've seen, I will say one thing on the metrics, at least from my personal experience, and then jump up, is some of these metrics, right, are for making the product to be used, like for people to use the project and enjoy the product. Some metrics which are come out at the beginning of the project, say like, okay, we're going to do platform engineer, Mr. VP of engineering, and the VP of engineering will say like, how much funding do you need, and then why would I give you funding, and how do I know if this stuff is like giving the return of investment. So these metrics are also very important at the beginning, because that's how you're going to get funding. You're going to say, well, we're going to get this value out of it, and we're going to measure that value through capturing the KPIs, right? So the KPIs are the indicators. So I think that's maybe another. You have to build a good product, but who's going to fund you, right? I'm saying VP engineering is kind of like, if you're a startup, right, will be a VC giving you funding, but somebody's going to fund the aspect that you're going to hire people, or you're going to stop working on something else and start working on this. You have to give what is the trade-off, right? And expressing that trade-off as your measurement. It comes a lot like in conversations where people are like, I want to do platform engineering. How do I convince my boss to allow us, right? And that's kind of like, this is that this metrics coming up in chapter 2, I think is very good. Any thoughts? I'll jump back to the principles. I think that was an interesting, at least new to me, that it was interesting. I don't know for Sevi, but the who wants to expand on like the principles? It's kind of like a little framework in here. Like it's like teaching you how to write principles, right? Where did that idea came from?
I think that was my past as enterprise architect. For me personally, it always made sense to think about principles and use them as some kind of guidance when you are doing a project, when you do a product, when you implement something. Somewhere it got lost, I would say, in the IT world, maybe because it sometimes doesn't feel like, I don't know, honest enough or right enough, or not really sure how to mention it. But in the good old times, when we advised like companies for implementing enterprise architecture, the very first thing we always were talking about are principles, because they give us a direction and it helps us to understand the broader organization, why they maybe decide in the one or other direction. And then on the other hand side, also to define own principles, for example, for an IT department, or if you have a very large IT organization, even break it from there down. And so because I see that this kind of knowledge or experience around it got a little bit lost, we indeed wrote it in the way that it should help someone to define their own principles and give some steps and ideas, some examples to it, and also like explaining different narratives, so that either you command something or you will speak more about the vision or wishes and so on. Because sometimes you cannot catch up if you say like, do X, Y, Z, then people don't feel catched with it. But if you explain your bigger thing, your bigger goal you want to reach with something, and especially then how this principle pays off for it, then it's more helpful, for example, to do I will or I wish principles.
And then this goes with another book that I remember, Sevi, but that talk about like this part, right? These principles are helpful to guardrails in your architecture and then engineering decision, which is related to ADRs. I think Sevi brought it up last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it was when we had a look at ThoughtWorks Radar, probably.
Yep.
And we the way you publish and communicate your decisions is also important. I think it was a way, like a way to communicate those decisions. But I have a question related to principles. I find it really strong to start with principles. I was thinking, what about autonomy here? Like as a small platform team, I can start writing my principles. What if the wider group organization that I belong to, not just my users, but like all the other teams that I interact with, don't actually, well, don't buy in my principles. I was thinking, yes, how autonomous should be while you're writing these.
I mean, we're actually at a very good point, right? Where you can say, like, if you're unsure, then start with less, and just have the 1 or 2 or 3, which helps your little team to get started and get a direction of it. Principles are just become true if you stick to them or let your team being guided by it. And so with time, you buy trust. If you do not follow the principles, so I don't know. Let's take something obvious. You say like, hey, one of our core principles is to build sustainable products. And then you can break this down and say like, okay, what does it mean for us? The systems must be extremely scalable, but they must be also scaled down automatically by themselves. And maybe we need to take the informed decision in which data center we are going, because maybe Germany is not the best environment to do it. So maybe Stockholm will do the thing. Very easy to break down, very simple to visualize what you actually want to achieve with it. But the next day you decide like, oh, because, I don't know, for some reason, Frankfurt is more cheaper. We go to Frankfurt, scale up the largest cluster which we can ever find. We buy all the servers. We do not scale up and down because, I don't know, I believe we need all the resources. Then you will lose the trust of the people for that, right? So that's why it's important that if you decide for principles, that you also follow them, or explain why some principles have a higher weight than other principles. And then with time, you can, as Hillary already said, like go into user interviews and find out what is for the adopters relevant, and then define with them together new principles, which you maybe would like to act on in the future.
And also think maybe, Sevi, if I understand your question also correctly, between autonomy and kind of providing kind of strong guidance. Some people then always think they lose control, but the question then in the end really is, if they're not happy with what you propose, then maybe you're proposing something that in the end doesn't make their life easier. And this comes back to first understanding what is the real problem that your organization has right now. Can you quantify it? And if you can quantify it and you provide a solution that will make it easier for them, even though they might be constrained in 1 or 2 other ways, they will adopt it. They will start seeing the benefit. And this is why, coming back to what we said earlier, the first thing you need to understand is what is the problem that we have, and would, as a platform engineering approach where we are solving a certain problem and providing it in an easier way to the engineers, would this solve the problem? And because if so, and if you can quantify it, then you will probably become more successful. And if you just start building something and then hoping somebody will use it, this is bound to fail. And I know we're repeating ourselves now, but this is extremely, extremely important, right? Find the real problem that you solve for the real people that later on will use your platform.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, very strong statement if you can write down your principles, because you usually try to define your North Star in technical terms, but it's also without your principles, like how you're actually providing value to your customers, it sometimes just it's a very strong thing that it will impact the technical North Star as well. So thank you.
And
I think the thing that I was thinking about as we were writing the book is that internal engineering teams that, don't build things that directly impact customers do not have a business persona like necessarily baked into the team. right? There's not a product manager or a product owner like just sitting on a platform engineering team a lot of the time. So what we're encouraging people to do is learn these skills that those business folks have, and kind of put on that hat and apply it, so that, you know, somebody I talked to recently was like, engineering problems end up being the same thing over and over again. Business problems are what's unique. And I agreed with his statement there. I think, and it's kind of exactly what we were driving at with our approach here.
I
Yeah,
think you
really
have
good point,
you
yeah.
have you talk about that in some aspect here. I think I was going to talk about remove the experts. Like you can see, like chapter 2, it never ends. It has almost like 3 chapters in it, but this one I think it goes with what you're saying about like having personas or people that have those skills of like, I think it was the build the right thing was the person that knows about what you were saying, like the business value of like always asking like the engineering thing, like why would the end user, in this case the developer, will use this, and then if you don't have that persona asking and be like, well, because that's their job, they have to write application, they have to use our platform, like, well, if we treat them as a consumer, right, as a business consumer, like why we will, if you have the choice of not doing that or doing something else, or you achieving the same goal through a different way of not using the product that you're building, then they will do their own thing, and usually that's what happens. So yeah, the viability, building the right thing is the key here. Or build, I think it was desirability. I think it was, I got confused with ability. I build what customers want. I think that's what's the one that was mentioned at the bottom. So yeah, so that's principles. We had product. I think the product as a mindset, or like always think that the platform is the product, will go through the whole book, right? I think that's a recurrent, like you're going to hammer that along the way. Let's talk about the idea of like and then I like this, and then you share a mirror board on like if you're going to have folks, and a lot of people I think are going through this, at least I see it in my company, working with a lot of end users, and they're going exactly through this of saying what are the targets, what are the principles, who's using it, who's the stakeholders, like I was mentioning, like the VP of engineering always goes in stakeholder, but also the end users, right, the people as a persona, and the purpose, like why are you building this, why do we need this, a lot of people asking that question. So the KPIs, and then we go into more of a technical discussion, which I really like this. We have one in I've built some of this in the Canoe and other projects, but I really like this. And then I think you have it in Miro and you have it in Draw.io, like these boxes are empty, right? Can you talk a little bit about and then you call them planes, like I know the control plane, and then you talk layers, and then here are plane, which I like, and then resource plane, I usually call it the worker nodes, but I tend to steal a lot of nomenclature from this book from now on.
Perfect. Well, the idea with the planes is more like, I mean, a lot of the stuff is like in itself already in a controlled ecosystem. So let's take a look in observability corner, where also Andy is our expert. Like everything what lives within this space is already like has its own definition, it has its own approaches, but also its own standards, right? So I would not call it layer, because it's not like something which I put on top. It's more like that's an entire ecosystem which knows best how to do what, where to find which metrics, how to get the right information, and so on and so forth. And then the same for security or automation. That's why we say like that's an entire plane. It's not just a layer, because you can find for each of them their own experts. The overall idea actually is like more or less stolen from the perspective of this kind of public reference framework around IDPs. The only thing which we have drastically changed is the capability plane also, because that's for me always the missing part. If I take a look at the standard definition for like IDPs and platforms, we're talking about that we are implementing most of the time on Kubernetes a very complex platform that automates everything and is plug and play. But somehow on this architecture, and I know how hard it's actually to draw, is like what's going on the platform, like in the Kubernetes, because this is for us the bridge between like the user space. This might be developer, as I said, can be DevOps, can be ops, whatever, and the actual resource consumption and the resource utilization. And we have later on another picture where we go to some more details. But if you think now, for example, about Crossplane, where do you would put Crossplane? Is it something which you would go into the infrastructure orchestration? Yes, it would fit there, but Crossplane normally lives within the cluster or within any kind of cluster, sometimes an admin cluster whatsoever. So it's a thing which has actually two places to be there. And it's right to put it on two different places. Or if you think about networking, the networking in Kubernetes can come on top of the rest of the other network which you have in your environment and so on. So I think this is the most biggest change which you have done to the default reference architectures which you can find out there.
Yeah, I think for the most part, what I've seen is that when people talk about IDPs or the internal developer platform, describe the platform is only the top two on the left: dev experience, which is a portal with platform infrastructure source code and application source code, and then the bottom one, which is automation and orchestration plane. And that's it. The other one is just columns on every side, like a security crossover, observability crossover, regulations crossover, costs crossover, and then that's so this is a broader one that this is more than that. For maybe stakeholders are funding this, saying like, oh, you're just doing the two boxes. The other ones, we keep doing what we're doing, and we don't have to we don't have to change anything about that, and maybe you have to. So I like, go ahead.
I mean, we talked last time about it, right? That the developer portals, for example, the platforms which we have with some of our customers working most best in class for us don't have a developer portal. No one cares. They utilize, for example, a GitHub practically as their development entry point. I would not call it a portal because GitHub itself is like a huge mighty tool, but it could be also GitLab, right? It's just nice to have at some point, and therefore, I see more like the platform itself is often somewhere between the resource management and the orchestration of it.
Yeah.
And how you provide it then to the user. This is then the platform as a product perspective, right? How do you make all the capabilities which you have implemented on the infrastructure side usable to the end user, but not that you have to teach them like, oh, look, here are 5 different cloud providers. This is our 2 different deployment pipelines. That's a 10 different, I don't know, container registries you have your stage your applications through. No, you want one entry point, put everything in there and get somewhere your application served.
And you let me see how we're doing time. You talk about the reference architecture, and I guess that this is an area where I struggle a lot, because it depends what like no one comes with like just money and say, I want to like build apps and then have platform engineer, right? People already have things, like they have procurement, they're using vendors, they're using software, so you have to come up with an architecture that meets them where they are, but at the same time shows them where they want to go and what things they should keep and which ones they should swap. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this, or expand, like maybe something that was difficult to capture in the book, and you want to expand on it, on terms of like reference architectures? And then I think you say you have to build your own one. You even have a workshop, right?
Yes. So I mean, like the reference architectures, they really help to understand which tools do you want to use and bring in. I mean, the shown here one are from the platformengineering.org. Very thankful for the guys that we were allowed to use them. And I mean, this helps to explain on a very, very high level what are you using but it doesn't explain which capabilities your platform provides. So what is the platform able to do? You have an Argo CD there. Okay, cool. But okay, so I have learned something. Argo does maybe GitOps. Fine, but what does it mean for me?
Capability. What is the capability?
Yeah, what's the capability? What I'm allowed to do with it? What does it allow me to do it? And that's why the reference architectures itself is always just like a nice fast entry point. We have good experience to use it and discuss it with new product teams and platform teams on it, but it's really just a starting point. And then while thoughting through that, we were like, okay, we need a workshop. We need something that helps you guiding through how to build your own architecture, so that you have something which you can put out there, which you can orient on, and which you can work on developing it in the future. And also there, the feedback is different, right? Some people say like, to manage somehow the architecture, it's so much work. We do every day releasing new features. Okay, that's might be true, but still, usually the overall architecture not necessarily changes. And from there, you can go to the direction of like, which capabilities do we provide? And the workshop guides you through it. It guides you through like defining your purpose. It guides you through defining your reference. And then it defines you and helps you how to work with drawing an actual architecture. Like this is, for example, now the capability plane, which is on Kubernetes, and the next picture should be more realistic on like how it would looks like, for example, on AWS working together with GitHub. Then you have an Azure Active Directory for that whole thing. You have an observability platform, and so on and so forth. So this is a more realistic picture for what an enterprise actually see, rather than this reference architecture picture, which is the idealized perspective on it.
Yeah, and having this is at least in my current role as a solutions architect, is a way to communicate faster with other vendors or stakeholders or collaborators, right? When instead of explaining verbally, like this is what we use, right? It's just a laundry list of things, but then like showing us an architecture, you can see like, okay, for observability, what do you use? Okay, use Dynatrace. For identity provider, okay, use Entra. Then you start making decisions based on what you have using in your, to create, maybe to modify the architecture, or talk about like what are the capabilities that you want to add, or what are the capabilities that this thing is providing. But in this case, this is an architecture doesn't have the mapping of capability, right, that this thing provides, right? That's also another kind of like diagram that I have gone through, like trying to map that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I found it. Like this, people were talking about, this is the workshop. It has a typo. I think I mentioned this in Slack, but I was able to load it and I share it in Slack.
Yeah, I have a question about this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, I want to read out loud Tony's contribution. He was saying, in my organization, we work strictly with use cases and requirements, but I believe that the end goal is the same. Don't build a service that none of the customers want. And about this, a few things caught my attention: motivation booster and reset button, that I hadn't heard before. Can you help me with those terms?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's this very nice workshop actually from Red Hat Open Source Labs that goes into details about really more on the motivation side around platform and building platforms. But they brought up actually these both terms. So the motivation booster is always like to consider like, hey, what makes my team being engaged and drives them forward? Why is that relevant? Well, we right now, my team is right now in highly regulated project. They are bored out implementing all day long policies. It doesn't make fun. It's not cool. It doesn't result into making a very cool platform. It looks like. So from time to time, we need to find topics. We need to find things which really motivates someone, which boosts up the team for like, hey, cool, now we have brought up something nice and new, well defined. Because in the enterprises, platform engineering often is not about implementing the latest, coolest, fancy tech, but more about finding something that makes sense for the organization, take away burdens, and often these burdens are around security, governance, compliance, for example.
By the way, folks who can't find what I said, it was in the Purpose Canvas, the platform engineering Purpose Canvas, the motivation booster and reset button.
Yeah. It's some part. It's before the workshop actually, where the idea is like, hey, I can agree as a team on like to define for ourselves, for all of us, the purpose of the platform, so that we can literally put it as a poster on the wall, and from time to time check it out. And then some of these elements come as an entry point into the workshop before I go into details, and then stage me through all the different parts here.
Yeah, it's a great asset, right? That a
Thank
lot of
you.
people are doing planning. So you have your architecture here, but you have the methodology, right? This is something that people can use to just share through the book.
Yeah.
On I think this is excellent. It's a workshop if people want to get started. It's a framework on like how to get the organization, right? Bring in people from different parts of your organization, right? The people that do observability, the people that do infrastructure. Bring one team or persona that usually people forget to invite. Who wants to guess? It's the developer.
Security?
Developer. Like they built a platform. The developer was never involved. Like, are you guys going to be a platform for me? Can I go? Can I come to that meeting? Because and then the conversations, half of the conversations, the developer wants to build an app, and the developer wants a database, and the developer wants actually Kubernetes access, and he wants to use kubectl, and actually he wants to see the logs, and then you ask the developer, like, you want to do all these things, right? Because you have to, but maybe I don't know what they are, or maybe I don't need kubectl if I can get the logs in a dashboard in Dynatrace. I don't know, Andy, like that resonates of what people want.
It does resonate. It comes back to what we said earlier, right? If you're building something without consulting your future end user, you are most likely not successful in selling them something afterwards, because you actually never thought about what problem they have and how they want this problem to be solved. So it comes back to the same thing, whether it's use case oriented or whatever, however you call it. Try to understand and sit down with them, and even better, invite engineers into your platform engineering team, because they are actually engineers, and you're building a software product in the end. B, they can be your customer zero or the product owner or whatever you want to call them, right? And involve them in every step along the way. I mean, this is exactly what you need
I'll
to
say
do.
one more thing also, like you mentioned in the book, was collaboration, of like when you build transparency and collaboration, because it's human, it's a human behavior, right? So I will feel better if you include me in this project in let's say at the beginning of the year when you folks were like planning on it, versus at the end of the year you say that you have a platform and asking us to contribute pull requests and contribute change things, and then if you want to modify something, just send us a pull request to the template. And what's better if you include me at the beginning so I can have opinions on how do I want to contribute, right? The development thing, versus at the end,
think about successful open source projects that we have out there. Why are they successful? Because they start solving a certain problem because somebody built it, but then these people that actually get help, they want to contribute, and with this open source project really thrives, because now you have all the people that use it also contribute to it to make it even better.
And when you're building internal developer platforms, that's one aspect that comes into it. Like the platform team may be the ones leading it, but it becomes an inner source, right? Where like that. I'll take a question from Archit. Just looking at the time. Go ahead, Archit.
Yeah, thanks. So very relatable what you mentioned. I previously I used to work in a big team, a bigger DevOps team. So we made stuff, but we never took a lot of feedback. But in my current role, even so we made everything. I made the stuff and we gave them Rancher dashboard. But then the developers were like, "Oh, can I have kubectl?" So yeah, the exact same thing happened. They really want to use it and contribute to that. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and the thing is, right in the beginning, if you would have asked them, how do you work right now? What do you like? And they would have said, well, we like kubectl. And then you could have asked, so what do you like about it and what could be improved? Then you could have given them a solution in your platform that gives them what they want. And even on top of them, that gives them something that they would wish kubectl can do for them. And then maybe you end up in an optimized version of it or something like that.
Yeah, a good point. Yeah, could ask for
Yeah.
more.
And in the case for Andy, maybe you can expand more into it. Like I have seen like developers ask for kubectl access to get the logs because that's what they learn doing the certification or learning Kubernetes, so they can get the logs of one microservice, one pod. But in the enterprise, right, when there's an incident, and you want to like go back to see the logs, you want to see the logs across like the 3 microservices that were doing the transaction or something. So telling them that they can use a dashboard where they can go the logs and do queries, that would be faster.
It could be a dashboard, or it could be, you can, like Max said earlier, right? In his organizations, they're working a lot in GitLab or GitHub.
Or CLI,
I think you need to figure out where are your developers and where do they want to consume certain data. And if they say, hey, I spend most of my time in Backstage because that's what they have, then maybe you provide a plugin into Backstage that surfaces the right logs, metrics, or traces in Backstage in their component, but with the guarantee in the enterprise level that plugin that you build really only gives them the data that they're allowed to. That's sensitive data is masked and so on. If they say, well, we actually live in Git, then build something in your platform where after a pull request, after deployment, you push relevant logs that are all of a sudden surfacing, new error logs, as a comment on that pull request, or give them a link to, hey, if you want to see more, click here, and then you get all the details without having to go through the hoop of finding your deployments in a production environment where you don't have access anyway. So first thing is, try to understand the use case. Okay, they want to get logs, makes sense. B, where do they typically spend their time? What tools do they use? And how can we then push the relevant data to them? It could be in the end a dashboard in Dynatrace or in any other tool, but it could also be that they're just sending it as a Slack message, as a Git commit, as a Backstage plugin, through a Backstage plugin.
Yeah, and then I think that's where like adoption, right? That you're talking. I think he'll mention adoption. He'll on bringing that to the end user, right? When somebody asks, the tendency is for the end user to say, I want access, and then like maybe the SRE or the security, like why, and then how. Like I'm not going to like give you access so you can get the information that you want. But Andy's saying like bring that thing where you are, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe bring in logs and they're sanitized and filter back to the IDE, right, or the terminal.
And also, right, if we have SREs, if we have people that are experts in understanding log analytics, these people can build a central self-service that says, hey, you know what? You don't need access to 1 million logs. What you want as a developer, you want to understand, did the log pattern change? Do you all of a sudden have a different ratio of error logs versus regular like info logs? And this is the information that I give you automatically with every pull request every day in the morning as an email or a Slack message. And this is why you should use my platform and don't keep doing what you do, because if you keep doing what you do, you may end up accessing data that you're not supposed to do. And then we have a challenge on the compliance side. So I think this is the magic of platform engineering, taking the expertise that you have in your organization and making it available in a self-service way. And self-service not always means somebody needs to open up a new dashboard and click on a link. Self-service also means the data gets to them where they are. But for this, you first need to understand who is your end user and where do they spend most of their time.
Yeah, that covers